I remember the moment like a freeze frame in time. It was just past midnight, and the city outside my penthouse suite was humming with distant life, taxis weaving through the glowing fog, neon signs blinking without apology. I had just wrapped up a whirlwind investor summit, the kind that leaves your voice hoarse and your thoughts scattered across too many spreadsheets. My shoulders ached, my tie felt like a noose, and all I wanted was silence. That's exactly what I got, but not in the way I expected. The door creaked softly. A maid entered. She couldn't have been older than 25, neatly dressed. In a black and white uniform, her golden hair tucked behind her ear, she looked up and smiled. A warm, gentle smile. But she said nothing. No greeting. No good evening, sir. Just her eyes, soft, aware, unafraid. And then she raised her hands. At first, I didn't understand. Her fingers moved with precision, forming shapes I hadn't seen in years. My mind scrambled to recall. Was it ASL? British sign? But deep inside me, something clicked. She was signing. Good evening. Do you need anything before I leave? That small gesture, that silent communication. It reached somewhere far deeper than any words ever had. For a few seconds, I just sat there, stunned. I slowly nodded. Then, fumbling, awkwardly, I signed back. No, thank you, I'm fine. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, then joy. Her hands paused, and she gave the smallest bow. Just before turning, she glanced back at me with that same calm confidence. Not the kind that demands attention, the kind that inspires it, and just like that, she was gone. But I couldn't look away from the door. It wasn't the first time. I'd met someone who reminded me of myself. It was the first time in years I remembered where I came from. You see, people know me now as the billionaire tech CEO. They see the jets, the stages, the photos in Forbes with a glimmering backdrop. But what they don't see is the dirt, the hunger, the sweat-soaked pillow from nights when I cried so hard I thought my lungs would collapse. They don't see the kid, the one with duct-taped shoes, sitting in a crowded internet cafe, learning to code by watching YouTube tutorials on mute. Because I couldn't afford headphones. I didn't grow up with crystal glasses and golden spoons. I grew up with ration cards and broken dreams. And strangely, that silent greeting, her fingers moving like poetry, brought it all rushing. Back in, I was 14 when I learned sign language. It wasn't out of charity or some noble intention. No, I had a classmate, Nadia. She was deaf. Everyone ignored her. But she always had this fierce brilliance in her eyes, like she was screaming through silence. One day I passed her a note. She smiled. The next day she gave me a book. Learn, sign in 30 days. That was the first time I finished anything without skipping halfway. I had forgotten about that version of me, the one who listened without sound, the one who felt connection without conversation. That's the same energy I saw in the Maid tonight. But she wasn't just cleaning rooms. She was observing worlds. And in her silence, I saw my storm. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the edge of the bed, hands folded, eyes staring at the city. Below, letting memories crawl out of the vault I buried them in. I remembered the first apartment we lived in, a 2-room box next to the train tracks. I shared a mattress with my brother and woke up every morning to the sound of steel screaming against steel. My mom worked 2 jobs. My dad, well, he left before I ever learned how to tie my shoelaces. Back then, our dreams were small. We didn't dream of billions. We dreamed of getting out of the neighborhood without getting shot or addicted. I used to clean toilets too, in a local cafe. I wore gloves 3 sizes too big and worked after school to help pay rent. I learned to code between shifts. Sometimes I used the cafe's public computer for 20 minutes before closing time just to teach myself something new. HTML, CSS. Later, Python. I didn't know what any of it meant. I just knew it wasn't sweeping floors. Funny, isn't it? Life has a way of hiding its biggest miracles inside its smallest encounters, just like that girl tonight. I didn't even ask her name. But her presence forced me to feel something I had shut out for years. Gratitude. I know how the world works now. People respect titles. They chase profit. They shake hands with smiles but calculate in silence. But back then, I didn't have an identity, no title. No name on a door, just a pair of hands, a second-hand laptop, and an unshakable belief that pain wasn't permanent if I used it properly. You don't just build billion-dollar companies, you build billion-dollar resilience first. That's what no one sees. They see the end result, the offices with glass walls, the private jets, the headlines that call you visionary. But no one sees the moments when I slept in a storage unit for 6 months, when my company almost went bankrupt after a server crash, when I lost my best friend and co-founder to a burnout-induced breakdown. No one applauds you in the dark. They only show up when the lights are already shining. But tonight, with no applause, no audience, I was reminded what real strength looks like. A young woman, probably underpaid, undervalued, invisible to most, and yet she moved with grace. She greeted me not with desperation or neediness, but dignity. She didn't ask for anything. She offered something: respect, humanity, connection. I don't know what she's been through, but I can feel it, and I know this much. Anyone who can smile that kindly in silence has seen things louder than words. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were flickering like signals from another world. My reflection stared back at me. Expensive suit, tired eyes, a heart I thought I had hardened too much. But tonight something cracked, not out of sadness, out of awakening. Tomorrow I'll find out her name. Tomorrow I'll do something more than just remember my past. Tomorrow I'll honor it by helping someone who still walks the same path I once did. And maybe, just maybe, that silent greeting, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a beginning. The next morning, I asked for her name. Alina, the supervisor told me, glancing at the roster sheet. She's part-time, covers the night shifts, mostly quiet, keeps to herself. Alina. That name settled in my chest like an anchor. I didn't ask anything more. Not yet. Because this wasn't about fixing someone's life. It was about remembering my own. My journey didn't begin with ambition. It began with survival. When I was 8, I sold candy outside construction sites. The men would laugh, call me little hustler, toss me coins like I was a street performer. I'd count every rupee with shaking hands. Some days, I earned enough for a meal. Other days, I just went home with dust in my pockets. We lived in a one-room flat with a tin roof. During monsoons, the ceiling cried more than my mother did. I remember lying on the floor, tracing the leaks like constellations. My brother would whisper dreams into the dark. One day we'll live in a house where the rain doesn't get in. Back then, a dry pillow was luxury. We didn't dream of wealth. We dreamed of normal. At 13, I found an abandoned library 2 blocks away from school. Most kids skipped it. The roof was cracked and the books smelled like mold. But to me, it was a cathedral. One day I found an old computer in the corner. It wasn't connected to the internet. No mouse, just a dusty keyboard and a blank monitor. I pressed the power button. Nothing happened, but I came back the next day anyway. On the 3rd day, it lit up. Someone had left an HTML book beside it. Learn to build a website. I didn't know what HTML meant, but I copied every tag by hand into a notebook. Those symbols were foreign magic. I didn't know it then, but I had taken the first step toward building my future. My mother didn't understand what I was doing. She thought I was wasting time. "Why don't you work at the factory like your uncle?" she asked. But I couldn't explain it. How do you describe a dream you can't even see yet? All I knew was, coding made me feel powerful. And that was rare. Because everything else in my world made me feel invisible. By 15, I was skipping meals to buy secondhand books. I hid them under my mattress. JavaScript, Python, Bootstrap. I couldn't afford electricity, so I memorized syntax by candlelight. I failed half my classes. Not because I was stupid, because I was building something the system couldn't grade. When I turned 16, my brother died, hit by a drunk driver on his way to work. He was just 18. He had been saving to buy me a new keyboard, one that didn't stick every time I typed the letter E. After the funeral, I locked myself in my room for a week, didn't eat, didn't speak, just stared at the wall. But one night, something snapped. I opened my brother's drawer and found a letter. Just 4 words, scrawled in his handwriting. Keep building your world. That was the last time I cried in silence. After that, I coded, like a madman, because the world had taken my brother. But I would build one where no one like us would be left behind. I started fixing phones for cash. At night, I cleaned floors at a restaurant. The owner was kind, let me use the Wi-Fi after closing. That's where I built my first app. It was useless, a calculator with animations, but it worked. And for the first time, something I built functioned. You know what that does to a kid who's only ever been told to be realistic? It breaks chains. I applied to university, got rejected. No money, no grades, no prestige. So I lied. I faked an internship letter and emailed a startup for an unpaid role. They believed it. And just like that, I was in, folding chairs, handing out coffee, watching meetings like a ghost. But I was also listening, learning, absorbing. They didn't know the janitor understood product market fit better than the junior developer. By the time I was 18, I had 3 prototype apps. All failures. No downloads. No users, just bugs and broken dreams. But I didn't care, because failure wasn't scary anymore. Stagnation was. So I pushed harder. I slept in stairwells. Borrowed shower time from a friend who lived in a hostel. Ate boiled eggs and bananas for a year. Every spare rupee went into server costs. Every login, every crash. I studied it like scripture. I was obsessed, not with money, with momentum. Because when you grow up with nothing, every tiny step forward feels like flying. I remember once I walked into a VC office. No appointment, no pitch deck. Just a 1-page idea printed on stolen paper. They laughed me out. I laughed too, but only after. I left the building because if they couldn't see it yet, that meant they weren't ready. But I was. People say success is built on smart decisions. That's not true. Success is built on dumb decisions made fearlessly, over and over, until the world realizes you weren't dumb. You were early. I didn't. Become a billionaire because I wanted to be rich. I became one because I refused to stop climbing the ladder, even when it was on fire. You know what skyscrapers are? They're just dreams stacked on top of nightmares. Every floor built on top of failure. And when you sleep on cold floors long enough, skyscrapers aren't symbols of status. They're symbols of escape. Now, years later, sitting in my leather chair, watching Alina through that glass, I realized something. She didn't need saving. She needed someone to believe in her before she became successful. And that's something no algorithm, no investor, no resume can replace. Human understanding, the T. Kind I was lucky enough to find, even if only in fragments, along my own climb. Not every storm announces itself. Some arrive quietly, in the form of a trusted voice, a signed contract, a new opportunity. Mine came wearing a smile. His name was Omar, sharp-dressed, smooth-talking, brilliant even. We met at a small hackathon I'd snuck into using a fake badge. He was already working at a mid-sized fintech startup, And I was the kid coding in cafes on borrowed Wi-Fi. He said he liked my hustle, said he saw himself in me. That should have been my first red flag. But back then, I was desperate to be seen. We started building an app together, a platform that combined micro-investing with AI-driven financial coaching. My idea, his pitch. We worked day and night. I did most of the coding, he handled the investors. I trusted him like a brother, maybe more than a brother. Because when you come from nothing, anyone who offers you a seat at the table looks like family. For 6 months, I barely slept. I worked. Through fevers, through family emergencies, through blackouts. I coded in subways, airport terminals, public bathrooms, anywhere I could find a power outlet. By the time we had a beta product, I had calluses on my fingers and permanent bags under my eyes. But it was working. People were signing up. Investors were calling. We got a feature in a fintech blog. Omar was suddenly everywhere. Podcasts, interviews, LinkedIn posts with my screenshots cropped out. And then, one morning, I woke up to a message from our back-end engineer. "Hey bro, your name isn't on the new cap table. You okay with that?" My heart sank. I logged into our shared database, access denied. I emailed Omar. No reply. I called him, straight to voicemail. I went to the co-working space we shared. My pass had been revoked. The receptionist gave me a look I'll never forget. Pity mixed with disbelief. Omar had quietly rewritten the company docs, replaced me as co-founder, rebranded the product under a new holding company I didn't know existed. He left me with nothing, no shares, no credit, no voice. He stole it all. And the worst part? He didn't even try to hide it, because he knew I couldn't afford a lawyer. That night, I walked 3 hours back to the room I was renting, a storage closet behind a mechanic shop. No windows, one bulb, mold on the ceiling. I sat on the concrete floor and stared at the wall. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat, motionless. Because betrayal doesn't explode. It sinks. For the first time in my life, I thought about quitting. Not just quitting the startup world. Quitting everything. The IA journey. The dream. Myself. You build so hard, so long, so obsessively, and then one crack shatters it all, and there's no one to blame but yourself, because you chose to believe. 3 days passed. I didn't touch my laptop. I didn't shower. I didn't answer any calls. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the pain to turn into something I could use. It didn't, until I heard music. A street musician had set up just outside the mechanic shop. An old man with silver hair and a scratched guitar. His voice was hoarse, but full of soul. I couldn't make out the words until he stopped mid-song and looked at the handful of people around him. He said something I'll never forget. "If your rhythm's still beating, you're not done yet." Then he strummed again. Simple. True. Devastating. I got up, brushed the dust off my jeans, and opened my laptop. That night, I wrote one line of code, then another and another. Not because I had a plan, but because rhythm had returned. I started fresh. New. Idea. No investors, no hype. Just me, a borrowed laptop, and a new Google Doc titled, "I Will Never Be Forgotten Again." The product wasn't flashy. It wasn't disruptive. It was useful. A scheduling assistant that worked offline, in low-data regions, for delivery drivers, nurses, single parents juggling 3 jobs. I didn't build it to pitch. I built it for people like me. I worked in silence for months. No tweets, no blog posts, no attention, just execution. I talked to users in grocery store parking lots. I printed my own flyers and handed them out at clinics. By month 4, I had 120 active users. By month 5, 400. Month 6, I woke up to a feature in a major tech blog titled, "The App That's Quietly Serving the Loudest Hustlers." Then came the email from a VC I'd pitched to before. He said, I remember you. You didn't quit. Let's talk. But I didn't accept funding. Not yet. I wanted to grow roots before chasing rockets. I worked day and night, sometimes with excitement, often with rage, not against Omar, against my own past. Because the truth is, I didn't lose everything because Omar was evil. I lost everything because I gave away my power in exchange for validation. That was on me, and I would never make that mistake again. I hired my first intern, a 19-year-old kid who reminded me of myself. I paid him before I paid myself. Not out of generosity, out of discipline. Because a real company takes care of its people before it takes care of its ego. 6 months later, we launched version 2.0. It hit 10,000 users in 2 weeks. The product went viral in the Philippines and Pakistan. We got offers from accelerators. I said no to most. I wasn't looking for hype. I was looking for home. One night, we were working late, my intern and I, when he looked up from his screen and asked, "What made you start again after losing everything?" I paused, then told him the truth, because I didn't come this far to stay small, and I didn't come from the mud just to sit in it. By the end of the year, we were cash flow positive, no flashy launch party, no press release, just quiet, consistent victory, exactly how I wanted it. Years later, I heard Omar's company had collapsed, overfunded, overpromised, underdelivered. I didn't celebrate, because I wasn't building my story to beat him. I was building it to be me. You can't steal someone's destiny. You can only delay it. And sometimes the greatest break is the one that breaks you, so you can rebuild yourself. Stronger, smarter, untouchable. Success is loud, but growth is quiet. And for a long time, I lived in that silence. Head down, sleeves rolled, caffeine in my blood, code on my fingertips. No interviews, no praise, just a 3-year stretch of pure, brutal building. They don't write about this part in magazines, the part where your laptop becomes your closest friend, where your bed is a couch in a shared basement, where every meal is a choice between gas money and groceries. This was the season of sacrifice, and I loved it. We'd start at 6 a.m., a cold shower to shock the system awake, black coffee, no sugar. My workstation? A plastic fold-out table wedged between a broken water heater and an old paint shelf. No windows, no insulation, just the hum of my CPU and the ticking of a wall clock that seemed to taunt me every night. I didn't work for hours. I worked in problems. Each day was a different puzzle, a bug, a feature no one used, a user who churned and left a 1-star review with no explanation. You don't understand true humility until a mother from a rural town messages you and says, "Your app deleted my whole schedule. I missed my clinic appointment." I replied in 10 minutes, apologized, fixed it overnight, rolled out a patch by morning. That's what it means to care, not about the product, but the people. Started recording voice notes from early users. Delivery riders, nurses, single mums who juggled 3 shifts and still found time to message feedback. I listened to them more than I listened to VCs, because they weren't guessing what the market wanted. They were the market. At one point, I was sleeping only 4 hours a night. My skin broke out, my voice got raspier, but I was never tired, because every bug I fixed, every user who said, "This helped me," was a mile marker on my escape. I didn't raise money. I raised momentum. We crossed 50,000 downloads without $1 in ads, because our users did our marketing for us, not because they were fans, but because they felt seen. No bloated onboarding, no unnecessary animations, just a tool that respected their time. I remember the moment I knew we had something. It wasn't when we hit 100K users. It wasn't when I got my first real acquisition offer. It was when I saw a driver in Manila using my app on an old Android with a cracked screen and smiling because it worked, because he didn't feel ignored, because for once, he was the customer that mattered. The team grew, from 1 intern to 3 freelancers, then 2 part-time engineers. I hired slow, deliberately. I interviewed based on mindset, not resume. Can you learn faster than the problem grows? I asked. If they said yes with certainty, I moved on. But if they paused, thought about it, they were hired. We didn't have fancy offices. We had Trello boards and WhatsApp groups. We didn't have kombucha or catered lunches. We had day-old pizza and cold coffee. But what we did have, a mission and momentum. One cold night in December, I walked into a 24-hour diner, laptop under my arm. The waitress, an older woman with tired eyes, asked, "Same booth?" I nodded. It was booth number 7, the only one with an outlet. I'd been working there so long, the staff knew me by name. As I typed, a man tapped my shoulder. Middle-aged, casual shirt, friendly tone. "You the guy building that offline schedule app?" I turned. "Yes," he smiled. "My wife uses it. Says it helps her keep track of patient visits." I thanked him. He nodded again, then walked away. Just like that. No big speech, no applause. But in that moment I felt wealthier than ever before, because the world was finally speaking back. We launched a premium version, cents per month. Nothing fancy, just priority support and extra customization. The results shocked me. Over 20,000 users upgraded in the first 30 days, not because they needed the features, but because they wanted to support us. That's the thing. No investor metrics can measure. Loyalty, rooted in impact. With that revenue, I hired our first designer full-time, upgraded the servers, moved out of the basement into a tiny studio. No air conditioning, but it had sunlight, and after years of fluorescent flicker, that light felt like freedom. Around this time, the press came knocking again. TechCrunch, Wired, Fast Company. I ignored most of them. Not out of arrogance, out of focus. Because every hour I spent telling the story was an hour not spent building it. Still, I agreed to one interview, a podcast with a founder I respected. At the end, he asked, "What do you think made it work this time?" I paused, then said, "Because I stopped building for applause and started building for the people who can't afford to be ignored anymore." That episode went viral. Suddenly my inbox was flooded. Founders asking for advice, strangers offering investment, old classmates pretending we were always close. Even Omar messaged me, a single word. Respect. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, out of peace. Because I no longer needed closure. I had clarity. You see, the world teaches you to chase success. But real success? It arrives when you're too focused serving others to notice. I worked through 2 winters and a global pandemic, launched version 3.0 from a folding chair in a friend's garage. Our user base crossed $1 million revenue, 7 figures annually. Our churn rate? One of the lowest in the category, not because we were perfect, but because we listened better than anyone else. Now, you'd think this would be the part where I sit back, take a vacation, maybe write a book. But then, one evening, I walked into a luxury hotel for a speaking event, and a maid greeted me in sign language. Alina. That moment didn't just bring things full circle. It cracked open something I thought I'd sealed away forever. The version of me that once cleaned tables and practiced coding between shifts. She reminded me, no matter how high you climb, never forget how it felt to be overlooked. And that's when I made my next decision, one that would change both our lives. Alina. That name lived in my mind all week. I couldn't explain why her simple gesture hit me so deeply. I had met presidents, debated billionaires, shared panels with AI pioneers. But none of them moved me the way her silent greeting did. Maybe it was her eyes, or maybe it was her presence, because she wasn't there to impress or persuade. She wasn't chasing a pitch or a promotion. She was just being. And yet, somehow, she said more in silence than most do with a microphone. I started asking discreetly about her. Her file said she worked part-time, no university listed, lived 2 hours from the hotel, night shifts only, always early, never missed a day. I asked the manager how she communicated with guests. She taught us basic signs, he said. Even made laminated cards for new hires. Most don't notice. But she's incredible. I nodded slowly, keeping my thoughts inside. Because what I was realizing wasn't about her. It was about me. Alina reminded me of the version of myself I buried under boardrooms and balance sheets, the version who had nothing, who showed up with sincerity and fought for recognition without ever asking for it. And as I watched her work from afar, folding towels, aligning trays, moving with quiet precision, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Shame. Because somewhere along the way, I had started to believe I was the reason I made it. I forgot about the people who opened the doors just wide enough for me to slip through. The librarian who let me use the broken computer. The diner owner who let me stay after hours. The street musician who played the song that saved my soul. They were Alina's, and I had almost forgotten them, until she greeted me. So I made a call. To my executive assistant. I told her to send me everything Alina had submitted when she applied. For the job, references, background, any notes. She paused. Sir, there's a personal note in her file. Read it. She hesitated again, then read aloud. I don't want a handout. I just want the chance to work. I may not speak with my voice, but I will speak through my effort. My throat tightened. I closed my eyes, because in that one sentence, she captured the very essence of everything I used to be. I didn't climb because someone carried me. I climbed because when the ladder was missing, I built one with my bare hands, and now I had the power to pass someone else the wood and nails. I arranged a private meeting. No fanfare, just me, a whiteboard, and a dream I hadn't shared with anyone. When she walked into the room, escorted by the hotel supervisor, she looked confused. She signed cautiously. Did I do something wrong? I smiled and signed back. You did everything right. Her eyes widened. I motioned to the chair. Please, sit. We didn't speak much, not with voices anyway. I showed her an iPad with a simple question written in bold. If you could build anything at all, what would it be? She stared at the screen. Then slowly, her fingers danced. An app that teaches sign language to kids. Fun. Friendly. Free. I nodded. And why? She signed, faster this time. Because I lost my voice. But no child should lose their connection. That was it. That was the pitch. No deck. No spreadsheets. Just truth. And I felt it in my bones. The next day, I introduced her to my team. Our designer cried. My lead developer said, "This is the most important project we'll ever work on. We want..." Didn't treat her like a maid. We treated her like what she was, a founder. I set up a private grant, gave her a stipend, bought her a new laptop, assigned her a mentor, one of our most seasoned product managers. And within 2 months, Hands That Speak was born, a beautiful, gamified sign language learning platform for children. Colorful, joyful, accessible. Every tap, every animation, crafted with love. With her love. We launched a beta version quietly. No press. Just a message sent to special needs teachers and parenting communities. The response? Overwhelming. Within 3 weeks, the app had 50,000 downloads. In 6, it crossed 200,000. We were featured in accessibility blogs, educator forums, even language development journals. But none of that mattered to me. What mattered was seeing Alina walk into our office one morning with a letter in her hand. She handed it to me. Inside was a drawing from a deaf 6-year-old boy in Brazil. He had drawn himself and the app mascot, smiling, signing, communicating. His mother had written below, "This is the first time my son believes he can talk to the world." I looked at Alina. Tears welled in both our eyes. No words were spoken. None were needed. Because this was what wealth was meant to do. Not accumulate, amplify. I thought back to something my brother once said, years before he died. We were lying on a cracked mattress, staring at the leaking ceiling. He whispered, "Maybe one day, we'll be the reason someone doesn't give up." Back then, I thought he meant someday, far away. Now I realized, someday is always one act of kindness away. Alina didn't need saving. She needed believing, and in helping her rise, I reclaimed the part of me that I thought I'd lost forever. The morning she was escorted upstairs, everyone held their breath. The hotel staff thought she was in trouble. Some whispered, "Did she break protocol?" Others just stared, confused, cautious, curious. Security flanked her on both sides. As they led her through the executive floor, past velvet carpets and glass walls, to the penthouse conference room. But they weren't there to intimidate her. They were there to honor her. She entered the room quietly, eyes searching for familiarity. I stood up from the head of the table. She looked at me, still confused, still calm, still her. "Welcome," I said, gesturing to the seat next to me. "This is your meeting." Around the table sat 6 of my most trusted partners, product leads, advisors, 2 angel investors who had funded my earliest ventures, the ones who believed in me when I was nothing but bones and ambition. They looked at Alina the same way they once looked at me, like something rare had just walked into the room. I tapped the screen and brought up a slide, hands that speak, pre-launch results, 100K downloads, 97% retention rate. Over 10,000 5-star reviews from teachers and parents across 14 countries. But that wasn't the number that moved them. The number that did, $0, no ads, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. The app was completely free, and yet, it was already more valuable than most funded projects they'd seen all year. I turned to Alina and signed slowly. "Tell them why you made it." She nodded and began. No voice, no translator, just her hands, flowing like poetry. Telling them how growing up without sound made her observant. How being ignored made her empathetic. How she wanted to build something that gave children what she never had and the power to be understood. When she finished, the room was silent, and then one of the investors, an old man known for being stoic, leaned forward and said, "She just made the most compelling pitch I've seen in 2 decades, without a single spoken word." We closed funding that afternoon, not millions, not even hundreds of thousands. Just enough. Because that's all she asked for. Alina didn't want to scale for the sake of status. She wanted to sustain, to grow slow, real, human. So we gave her the freedom to do just that. 3 months later, we launched. Globally, Hands That Speak was featured by Apple as one of the top 10 educational apps of the year. It was translated into 17 languages, and within the first year, it helped over 1 million children learn to communicate with deaf siblings, classmates, parents. Not just communicate, connect. But this isn't a story about an app. It's a story about a moment. About the power of a single silent greeting. About how kindness, when met with vision, becomes a revolution. I've spoken on stages in front of 30,000 people. I've rang the NASDAQ bell. I've shaken hands with kings and presidents. But nothing compares to the morning I saw her walk into that room. Not as a maid, not as an employee, but as a founder, as a force. You want to know what it takes to become a billionaire? Here it is. Not hustle porn, not fancy degrees, not unicorn pitches. It's this. Listen better than anyone else. Care deeper than what's profitable. And when someone like Alina walks into your life, don't just applaud them. Invest in them. Because they are the future, and the future always speaks, even when it doesn't make a sound. These days, I don't chase valuation anymore. I chase validation of purpose, of impact, of legacy. Because long after the checks clear and the headlines fade, all that's left is the question, who did I lift when I could have walked away? And if that answer isn't clear, then maybe the money was never really wealth. Sometimes a revolution doesn't knock, it whispers. Sometimes the next great founder doesn't come from Stanford. She comes with a mop and a message, signed with silent fire. I was escorted upstairs. But she was lifted, and the world will never be the same.